The conference room was glass-walled and cold both in temperature and spirit. The hum of the ceiling vent filled the silence as I walked in, holding a plain white envelope with my resignation tucked neatly inside. My fingers didn't tremble, but my heart galloped under my blouse like it was chasing something I couldn't yet see. Colby was mid-scroll on his phone when I spoke. "I'm resigning," I said, placing the envelope on the polished walnut table. "I'm starting my own business, a home decor studio. Handcrafted work." He blinked at me like I'd announced I was moving to Mars. Then he chuckled. "A business," he said, slowly looking up. "At your age?" The chuckle became a bark of laughter. From the corner, Kevin from operations leaned back, smirking. Denise covered her mouth, but her eyes glittered with amusement. "God, Marie Colby," said, wiping his eyes. "You're what, 51? Are you seriously going to make dream catchers now? What's next? Scented candles and life coaching?" I didn't answer. I just stood still, hands clasped in front of me, watching them enjoy the punchline I had unknowingly become. "You've been here forever," Colby went on. "You're part of the structure. Reliable, predictable, like a filing cabinet or a fax machine." He leaned back, still smiling. "Look, if you're burned out, just take some leave. Don't blow up your life for a midlife Etsy crisis." I picked up my letter and slid it across to him. "It's not a crisis," I said. "It's a choice." He opened the envelope, shook his head, and laughed again. "Antique, trying to sell antiques," he muttered to himself. I walked out without another word past the frosted walls and dry smiles past the ghost of who I had been in this building. In the elevator, my phone buzzed. A new message on LinkedIn. Maria Larkin. I hadn't seen that name in over a decade. She'd curated an interior design exhibit I'd once shown a prototype in before I tucked all my sketches into storage. "Are you still thinking about launching your studio? Let's talk." I stared at the screen. Breath caught somewhere between fear and something I hadn't felt in years, hope. The elevator doors opened. I stepped into the lobby, still holding the message in my hand. I didn't go straight home after leaving the office. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the streets blur past the hum of the tires, filling the silence. Colby and his laughter had left ringing in my ears. 24 years. That's how long I'd given them. 24 years of staying late, fixing what others broke, training interns who'd leapfrog me within 18 months. I had been the one people came to when projects slipped or clients threatened to walk. "Mered will handle it," they'd say. I was dependable. I was solid. I was the glue. But glue doesn't get promoted. It gets used to hold other things together, things deemed more important, more visible, more polished. I watched them come and go, the fresh grads with perfect smiles and buzzword vocabularies, the ones who brought energy but couldn't manage a deadline without hand-holding. I taught them everything, then watched them climb. The worst of it wasn't the promotions I didn't get. It was how invisible I'd become. During one staff retreat in Sedona, I suggested we pitch a green living strategy to a rising client, repurposed materials, upcycled furniture brand alignment with conscious consumers. Colby smirked and called it hobbyist aesthetics. He said it like I'd suggested finger painting. Months later, I overheard him in the hallway talking to another manager. Mareed's basically part of the furniture at this point. Solid, sure, but no spark. Just there. Just there. I didn't cry, not then. I swallowed it, filed it away like all the other slights. But that night, I remember opening the closet in my spare bedroom, moving aside boxes of winter coats and forgotten photo frames. I pulled down the spiral-bound notebook with the torn corner. Inside were years of sketches, lamp bases shaped from stacked books, entryway benches made from reclaimed shutters, floating shelves with brass joints. I'd written notes in the margins. Try walnut for warmth, sanded texture, coastal vibe, narrower drawer to hide chargers. I'd started it during a lonely Thanksgiving weekend more than a decade ago when my son had chosen to spend the holiday with his father instead. I ran my fingers over the first page, then slowly flipped to the last one I'd filled. The paper had yellowed, but the ideas still breathed. The day after I found the notebook, I cleared out half the basement. Old boxes, rusted, shelving, cracked holiday decorations. I donated what I could and hauled the rest to the curb under a dim gray sky. I bought a folding workbench and a cheap set of chisels, pretending they were nothing more than a whim. Every evening after work, I came home changed out of my corporate skin and descended the stairs with a quiet kind of hunger. I watched videos on joinery and finish techniques until my eyes ached. I bookmarked articles on small business taxes and learned the difference between hardwood and softwood all over again. The name came to me while sanding an old window frame moss light studio. It sounded like something soft and wild, something alive. I tested it on my lips more than once, whispering it into the sawdust air, hoping it would grow roots. By week 3, I was enrolled in a crash course on brand storytelling. At night, I scrawled slogans in a yellow legal pad and practiced talking about value propositions out loud in the mirror. I learned how to set up an Etsy storefront, studied how to photograph pieces in natural light, and started building a website from scratch. Every spare dollar went into this strange secret life. My retirement cushion gone, my tax refund tools, birthday money from my sister wood glue and clamps. I didn't tell anyone, not Maria, not my son, not even Barbara, who usually knew everything. The dream felt fragile, like a bird in my hands. I wasn't ready to show the world. On the final night of my notice period, I stood at the kitchen table laptop, open cursor blinking on the registration screen. It asked for a name. I typed it slowly. Moss Light Studio. Then I added my information, reviewed it twice, and hovered over the button. I pressed submit. My hand was shaking. Upstairs, the light above the stove hummed softly in the silence. The confirmation email arrived within seconds, and just like that, I was no longer just leaving something. I was beginning. The day began like any other Tuesday, gray, quiet, unremarkable. I arrived at the office early, still in the habit, even though I'd stopped caring weeks ago. My notice period had ended, but I'd agreed to stay another week to finish handover notes. I told myself it was the professional thing to do. The truth was, I hadn't figured out how to say goodbye to something that had taken 24 years of my life. No one said anything when I walked in. No card on my desk, no email thread with subject lines full of confetti emojis. Even Amanda from HR, who managed birthdays like a mission, breezed past me with a tight smile and no mention of the date. By noon, I found myself in the copy room chewing a stale granola bar from the vending machine. I sat on the low counter next to the recycling bin, the hum of the printer, the only sound around me. I remembered how I used to bring in cupcakes for other people's birthdays, write little notes on recycled note cards, add a ribbon just because. No one had ever asked me to. I just thought it mattered. But apparently I didn't. I left early without telling anyone. At home, I poured a glass of wine I didn't want and sat at the kitchen table, the silence louder than anything. My phone buzzed at 7:42 p.m. It was Maria. "Happy birthday, Mered. If you're ready, I'd love to mentor you. There's still space in the spring artisan show, nothing huge but good exposure." Interested, I read the message 3 times. The words felt like a hand reaching through the fog. I got up and walked to the basement, turned on the bare bulb above the workbench. My latest piece, a simple table with dovetail joints and copper inlays, sat unfinished in the center. I ran my hand across the surface. The wood was flawed in places, uneven in tone, but it had shape now. Edges. Weight. So did I. I picked up the hand sander and began working. I was refreshing the Etsy dashboard again when it happened. After weeks of views with no action of tweaking the description, adjusting tags, rewriting blurbs until my sentences sounded like strangers I saw it. One order, $140. A reclaimed wood centerpiece with dark walnut stain and forged iron handles. I had listed it thinking no one would ever click buy. The buyer's name was unfamiliar. No mutuals, no message, just a clean, beautiful transaction. I packaged it like it was made of porcelain. Tissue paper, raffia twine. A handwritten thank you card I revised 3 times. I drove it to the post office myself, heart pounding like I was sending a part of myself across state lines. 3 days later, the review came. 5 stars. Absolutely gorgeous. The craftsmanship is stunning. Reminds me of real homes. So rare these days. I reread it more times than I'll admit. Then I clicked the Instagram tag. She'd posted a photo of my piece on her kitchen table, golden light pouring through a window. The caption, "This centerpiece from Our Moss Light Studio," makes the room feel like it belongs to someone who matters. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, not breathing. 2 hours later, a design blogger reposted the image with a link to my shop. That night, I got 3 new favorites. Then a message from someone asking about custom dimensions. Maria texted me the next morning, "Saw your tag on Juniper Home. Proud of you." Also, I spoke with Kaylee, the boutique owner I mentioned. She wants to meet over coffee next week. I stared at her text, then at the order confirmation on my screen. For so long, I'd assumed the world wasn't interested in what I had to offer, that people like me were background support beams, not centerpieces, but here I was, in someone else's home, on their table, making it feel real. I put my phone down, rolled up my sleeves, and reached for the cedar boards waiting by the bench. I was staining the base of a new console table when the message popped up on my phone. Zev work, FYI. Colby told the Henderson client you ghosted the handover and left us hanging. At first, I thought I'd misread it. I wiped my hands on my apron and read it again. No mistake. Colby was telling clients I abandoned the project. I sat down hard on the nearest stool, heat crawling up my neck. I had finished every deliverable for the Henderson account. Every document had been uploaded to the shared drive, every timeline annotated. I'd even color-coded the client notes. I'd offered to do a remote handoff with Jessica, the new hire. She never replied. Another message came through. "They're saying you left 2 weeks early without a word. The client's annoyed. I thought you should know." I stared at the screen numb. Colby wasn't just trying to erase me from the office, he was rewriting the ending of my story, making me the flake, the unprofessional one, the middle-aged woman who couldn't handle the pressure and walked out. And the worst part, I wasn't there to correct it. I wasn't there to be in the room. For a moment, I felt the old pull the instinct to defend myself, to write a long, careful email detailing every file I had touched. I opened my laptop. The folders were still there. All the proof. But I didn't send anything. I sat with it, with the quiet, with the ache of being misrepresented. Then I closed the laptop and walked to the workbench, because there, half assembled and waiting, was a console table that needed care. That wouldn't lie. That would tell its own story the moment someone ran their hand across its grain. Let Colby talk. Let him shape me into whatever narrative kept his meetings tidy. I had another narrative now, one that lived in wood and weight and truth. And the next morning, I opened my inbox to something I didn't expect. The subject line read, "Consulting Opportunity, Henderson Project." I almost deleted it on site, assuming it was a newsletter or some misplaced spam. But then I saw the sender, Colby Everett. I clicked it open hands steady this time. "Hi, Marie, hope you're doing well. I'm reaching out with a short-term opportunity we think could be a good fit. As you know, the Henderson account has hit some hiccups, and your institutional memory could really help us stabilize the next phase. We're offering a 3-month consulting contract, generous compensation, flexible hours. Let me know if you're interested. We'd love to work with you again." He ended it with, "We value your insight." The irony was so sharp I almost laughed aloud. A few months ago, I was part of the furniture. Now I was valuable. I reread the message once then, twice then walked to the kitchen for coffee before typing a single line in reply. I let the words sit for a minute before hitting send. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm too busy building what you laughed at." That was it. No greetings, no signature, just clarity. Later that evening, I told Maria. She burst out laughing and asked if she could post the line on a private design forum anonymously. I didn't care. I told her sure. By morning, it had been reposted by 2 major freelance business accounts, then quoted on a Women in Design Instagram page. I didn't ask for credit, and Maria didn't give it, but I knew it was mine. The comments rolled in beneath the post. "That's how you close a chapter. Put this on a t-shirt. We need to be this woman." My order queue doubled within days. A boutique in Denver asked about a wholesale collaboration. A stylist in Portland wanted samples for a home shoot. And tucked beneath those messages, buried in a new thread from Maria, was a meeting request from Kaylee Voss. The boutique owner Maria had mentioned weeks ago. She wanted to meet for coffee tomorrow. The pallet of lumber arrived 2 days late and 3 degrees warped. I could see it the moment the driver unloaded the stack. Each board bowed like a question mark. I ran my hand along the top piece and felt the split forming before I even reached the end. I called the supplier, was put on hold for 17 minutes, and finally got a half-hearted apology and a promise of partial credit. That same afternoon, a set of floating shelves I'd shipped to Oregon arrived shattered. The customer sent a photo, 3 of them actually. I stared at the jagged corners, the splintered finish, and felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Then came the final blow. The 6-piece dining chair order for the Prescott family, $4,000 worth of custom work. The biggest commission I'd taken was canceled. They were understanding, but clear the delays had pushed them past their move-in date. They needed something ready now. I offered to rush it at a loss, but they'd already bought replacements. I sat down on the floor of the studio, the dust from the last sanding still clinging to my sleeves. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at my hands. They looked older lately, more calloused, more tired. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Maria's name. My thumb hovered over the call button. I wanted to say it out loud. I'm done. Instead, I opened the drawer by the workbench and pulled out a note I'd saved. A customer had mailed it weeks ago, folded into the packaging of a returned thank you card. "Dear Mered, your bench made my house feel like a home again. I walk past it every morning and think I can rebuild too. After my divorce, I didn't think anything could feel grounded, but this piece did." I read it twice. Then a third time, tears catching at the edge of my throat. I stood up, opened my laptop, and started researching new lumber suppliers. I emailed 2 packaging companies, negotiated better shipping rates, and contacted a local courier. The next morning, I was sanding again when another email came in, this one with a subject line that made me stop breathing. The subject line read, "Congratulations, you're live." I clicked the link and stared at the screen, breath stuck somewhere between awe and disbelief. There it was. My face, my studio, my name featured in West House Living's spring issue under the headline, 10 Women Redefining American Home Design Over 50. They had used a photo Maria took in the studio a few weeks ago. Me beside a console table sleeves rolled a soft smile on my face. My workbench glowed behind me in natural light, and the caption read, "Moss Light Studio. The Quiet Revolution of Mered Vellon." The article quoted my customer reviews. My rising order numbers even mentioned my decision to turn down a consulting offer to stay focused on building something her way. And then, toward the end, came the quote. "They pulled from our interview, I was told I was too old to dream. I proved them wrong." I read the sentence again, slower this time. It didn't feel like mine, but it was. Every word. That same afternoon, a friend from a local design collective forwarded me a screenshot. It was from a corporate leadership seminar being held downtown. My photo was on the screen. The facilitator was presenting my story, my leap, my risks, my rebuild as a case study in career reinvention. And there in the second row, stiff-backed and frozen mid-sip, sat Colby. Someone had taken the photo mid-presentation. You could see it in his eyes, the shock, the dawning recognition. Around him, younger professionals were nodding, murmuring things like inspiring and power move. He didn't look angry, just small, as if the spotlight had shifted and left him behind. That night, orders flooded in. A boutique in Asheville reached out. A stylist in Austin wanted exclusive rights to my shelving line. And just after midnight, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from since the day I walked out of that glass conference room. We outgrew the basement by spring. The workshop moved into a sunlit corner unit on Nicollet Avenue with tall windows and a concrete floor that soaked up sound like a cathedral. The air smelled like cedar and varnish. It was the kind of space I used to walk past without imagining myself inside. I wasn't alone anymore. Diane joined first 53 newly retired from teaching hands, steady and patient as she learned to work a router. Then came Jada, laid off from a logistics firm during a restructure. She picked up sanding like she'd been doing it her whole life. Maria came on board full-time, not just as a mentor or occasional connector, but as a partner. We split decisions, celebrated wins, handled losses. She brought her sharp eye for composition, and I brought the grain. Every order had a story now. Custom pieces for blended families, entryway benches for women starting over, shelves for sons moving into their first apartments. One Friday night, we pushed the work tables aside and set up a long dinner under pendant lights we'd built ourselves. Pizza cider stories. Diane's laugh filled the room. Jada showed photos of her daughter's graduation. Maria toasted. To Mareed, she said, holding up her glass for building more than furniture. I smiled, but it was more than that. For 24 years, I said, looking around the table, I was quiet furniture. Now I build legacies. The next morning, I checked emails early. One stood out in the inbox, familiar sender, sharp subject line, Colby Everett. Congratulations, I didn't open it. Didn't need to. I left it there, unread like a letter never mailed. Then I walked into the workshop, tied my apron, and picked up a pencil. There was a new commission on the board, 12 cafe tables for a small business launching downtown. Another woman starting something from scratch. I sharpened the pencil and began sketching the edges, the corners, the strength. Some messages are answered with silence. Some dreams are louder than revenge.